dubbed Shuma Idina. Now, Idina is simply another form of Odin or Woden or Wotan, whatever you want to call it. And it simply means the one. And he was followed by Marduk Upla Idina and Zababa Shuma Idina. And they were the first three Odins. Okay?
Just a quick question here. Does this come from the Sumerian king list by any chance, these
Yes.
names? Okay, gotcha.
Okay. And in fact, in my book, The God Kings of Outremer, I give the Kassite dynasty king list.
Okay, yeah.
What then happened is that a hemorrhagic plague swept through Babylon. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And because of the way that sort of health and religion and Godhead were all tied up, if your people became ill, the gods were no longer with you, therefore you had to leave. Either that or you got sort of killed or something.
Right.
So the Kassite dynasty left Babylon and they moved northwards. And we know that they stopped on the way at Troy, but eventually they finished up in Scandinavia.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, in sort of southern Scandinavia, Sweden, Östergötland, Västergötland, Iceland, and I think there's an island off the coast called Gotland, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, they became known, of course, because they were so much more advanced than probably the people who were living there. They became known as the Got, or Gotta, the gods.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And we can show that because in roughly 1100 BC, a mutation took place amongst the Kassites, which is known as CCR5 Delta 32. And this particular mutation protects against the hemorrhagic plague.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It also helps protect, by the way, against HIV-1, which is interesting, which is why all of a sudden it became interesting to people today.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, the biggest concentration of that anywhere outside of Mesopotamia is in southern Sweden and Iceland. And when the Vikings eventually came down south and started rampaging around the place, they took that mutation with them, and many of the descendants of the Vikings can prove it because they are CCR5 Delta 32 mutation. Hello?
Okay, yes, I hear you.
So this is one of the ways that we can, if you like, science is showing the documentary evidence.
And the genetic evidence, I guess.
And the genetic evidence, indeed.
So...
okay, so what then happened is that the Goths then, as they then became known, came back south into Europe, where they split and became the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths. And it is with the Visigoths that we then take up the tale, because the Visigoths, or one of their leaders, a guy called Atulf, married a woman called Maria of the Elchusites. And Maria of the Elchusites claimed descent from the Davidic line of Israel via Jesus, or via his daughter. And this is where the two tie in.
I see. And I just want to return because I find it so interesting, this thing with the... you say, do you think it just was a spontaneous mutation that occurred that kept these people immune from later on than HIV-1, as you mentioned, but also from the... what was the first ailment you mentioned?
The hemorrhagic plague.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Okay.
Well, in point of fact, I mean, one of the interesting things they've now discovered is that the Black Death was not a bubonic plague, but was in fact a hemorrhagic plague.
Okay.
And the whole point about that was that when the Black Death hit that part of the world, all of a sudden, all these people were found to be immune to it. And in fact, the Icelandic saga, Hinlujo, actually says, in translation, these Sumerians were blessed by the gods because they were immune.
Yeah. Really, really interesting. And this, of course, as you mentioned, then must have been something that has been much interesting in today as well regarding HIV. Do you know if there's any modern genealogical projects that are going on in order to find these genetic, markers or whatever you call it?
Yes, there is.
There is.
There's quite a number of them.
Okay, yeah.
There's a Viking DNA thing that's going on. Then there's a separate, various Scottish clans like the Sinclairs have got their own DNA things going on.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also one that is being done by a couple of the universities, actually not very far from where I live, on CCR5 Delta 32. So, it is ongoing.
And are they successful, or is there progress in these?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not a DNA expert.
Right.
So all I can do is try and read what journals there may be on the question and sort of try and understand them, and then usually email people and say, well, what does this actually mean?
Right. Yeah. And just one more question on that, in regards to HIV. Then, do you know if that is still people then that are protected from HIV today that are alive? They're just immune to it. I mean, this is a very difficult question as well. But have you researched it? Anything?
I personally haven't, but I'm quite sure that the scientists who are concerned with it are beavering away on it, but they're not letting out anything at the moment. I mean, I suspect that one of the problems may be if they suddenly sort of announce that, well, guess what, all these people are
immune,
are not affected by HIV, that all this sort of business with the what should we say, the AIDS industry will all of a sudden disappear, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. So you might suspect here that this is something that isn't being publicly and openly talked about, as it were, perhaps.
I suspect you're quite right.
All right. It's always interesting. Okay, let's see here. I mean, maybe we can return and talk a little bit more about Odin, perhaps.
Yep.
The Odinic dynasty, as it were. We, of course, appear here that this is just a mythological character, of course, but I guess that you're saying that this is to the contrary, correct? You're talking about Woden.
No, I think what happened is that the original people were, if you like, god kings.
Mm-hmm.
God kings of Babylon. Now, by the time they got up to southern Scandinavia, this was, 600 years later, maybe more?
Mm-hmm.
Now, over that period, these beings, if you like, had become mythologized as gods. And you got the idea that Odin was, rode a 6-footed horse or something, and he had a big spear, and he had ravens on his shoulder, and he lost an eye at the well of whatever it was, and so on.
Mm.
But I think that this is a typical mythologization of, 600 years. Well, they vaguely remember that they were somewhere off in somewhere else. But really, they haven't got much clue about it anymore because it's all been handed down by tradition. It gets changed in the oral tradition as it goes along. And people add to them, and the epic poets all like to make big things about it and so on. So they add bits to it. And so we got this mythology, if you like, of who Odin was. But originally, I have no doubt whatsoever that the original Odin was a Kassite king in Mesopotamia.
And do you think that he came up to this area around when he was alive, or did the myth spread on?
No, certainly not.
Okay.
The point about it is that the Odin became a title. And for example, you get Rus the Vullingott, which simply means, Rus, the Odin god. Well, that he wasn't a god. That was his title. And he was sort of, chief of his dynasty or whatever it was, so that each chief or king or whatever it might be of the dynasty would call himself Odin.
Okay, as a title, yeah, I see what you mean.
And I think over the years there've been hundreds of Odins.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so this is when do you think that this happened? If we're talking about time here, how long did it take for this